Before we end, can you tell us what writers, so if an event happens in Israel, who are the writers, the analysts, the experts
Oh,
that you look to, that you trust the most?
yeah. Okay. So, let's see. Um, if for news, Barak Ravid, who writes for Axios, is the best source because the Israelis leak to him very, often, and it's different Israelis with different purposes. You have to read it wondering like who who told him this and why, and so you can't read it just like innocently, right? You can't read it naively, but he's a very good source of information. I think there are quite a few Israeli analysts who are really excellent. I was reading several today in Haaretz that I thought were really good. There's a guy called Shaul Areli, who's very very good. I think old Amira Hass is still worth checking out. I think she's very good. I think the what's his name that writes for Al Monitor. It's a subscription site, but it's worth subscribing to. Ben Caspit he's very good. I think for sure now to take it beyond that, I think I think I'm worth reading. I think Michael Young is very good on Lebanon. I think Raghida Dergham, Dergham, who writes for the National, like me, but she's brilliant. She's really, really an important person to read and to listen to. And she's a weekly columnist and really great. Kim Gattas is absolutely great on the region. I mean, I can keep going. There are a whole bunch of people.
You're not. I
All
don't
my
think
colleagues.
Aaron Mate is on your list.
No, I think he's a nut. I think he's a nut.
Right.
I think he's
I
absolutely
agree.
he's totally nut. He's bonkers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so same thing with Max
Yeah.
Blumenthal.
Yeah.
There are people who are just stuck in a narrative, right? A lot of people. Oh, let me throw out one to the mainstream. I think Tom Friedman's really good. He
Yeah.
has good,
Yeah.
he has good periods and bad
Yeah.
periods. Right now, he's acing it. Ever since the Gaza war began, he's been absolutely on point, without doubt at all. He's been great. So I would certainly do Friedman. Um, you know, there are so many more.
Okay.
Shannon Medham is excellent. Um, a lot of my colleagues at the Arab Gulf States Institute, they're all good. There's some really brilliant people out there.
Favorite books on the subject?
Yeah, The Iron Wall by Avi Schleim, The Iron Cage by Rashid Khalidi. The Some of the best stuff is archival stuff. So, before their diaspora by Walid Khalidi again, From Haven to Conquest, which is an indispensable collection of primary source material, going back to the earliest stages of the conflict, which has its deepest origins in the 1870s and 1880s. It has no origins beyond that. What people imagine is an ancient conflict, it is not. I'm talking about the very deepest roots, go back to like 1875 and things like that. So that's a very good source book on the conflict. Um, you know,
He,
uh, his, you know, uh, also there are a lot of books that are sort of yeah, I think Edward Said's book, The Question of Palestine, is still really a really good one. And his essay, there's a book of photos called After the Last Sky. And Said has an essay at the beginning of that, which is just beautiful. It's really brilliant. Um, and I think that also, if you're interested in literature, there's a lot of good Jewish literature from Palestine from before the Israeli state, but I think the quality of the literature went down once the state was established because for many reasons, but one of them is that the Israelis having a state didn't need to imagine themselves into existence anymore. It had been done, whereas the Palestinians have had like the international standing of the PLO and a few diplomatic wins like that, and then their literature, and that's about it. And they're people worth reading, like Mahmoud Darwish is an amazing poet and good in English translation. And certainly, a bunch of the others are really great and very much worth reading. Well, I quite like Murid Barghouti, but also Hassan Kanafani. Hassan Kanafani is really interesting because his his novels and poetry are full of humanity. And his political essays, especially the ones he wrote after he met George Habash and became part of the leadership of the PFLP, which was the most militant armed group, composed mainly of Palestinian Christians in the early 70s, and pioneered things like plane hijacking and things like that, spectacular stuff that they were doing. His political writing is quite extreme. And so it's a really interesting contrast between the way he lets his humanistic impulses soar in his art and kind of like stomps them down and buries them in his literary output, which is, he has this famous saying, formerly famous, it's been forgotten, but it should be remembered. It's very interesting. He said, there can't be a dialogue with the Israelis. How can we have a dialogue with these people? It's like a dialogue between the sword and the neck. It's a beautiful image.
I've heard that
It's
one
also
before.
very extreme. Yeah, I mean, it's both a brilliant image and it's also a fairly extreme statement.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he made this in the 60s and 70s, early 70s. He was sort of saying that before he was assassinated by Israel. And I think it's 73 or not, or whatever. Granted that the kind of zero-sum relationship was shared on both sides at that time. And that is a zero-sum, that is a quintessentially zero-sum statement. However, I would argue that its relevance is in its distillation of the mood of that people, their reaction to the dispossession and exile that was the result of 1947 and 48. And it's worth knowing about. There's no reason to shy away from it. So you've got to accept with Kanafani, a lot of people read. I've discovered by giving talks about Palestinian literature, and like I gave one at UMass earlier, Amherst, my alma mater, at the Complet department. I gave a public talk about this earlier this year, and a lot of people who specialize in modern Arabic literature and Palestinians were not familiar with Kanafani's political writing. They only knew his novels. So they had this image of him as this great humanistic figure. And I told them it's more complicated. You're wrong. You're not wrong, but you're missing something that's really important, that's a bit different. And it has to do with the time, it has to do with circumstances, it has to do with the public way that people in general were reacting, the nature of the Israeli-Palestinian relationship at the time, etc. And they were sort of astounded that they just didn't know this. Anyway, Kanafani is